A widowed coal miner consents to wed a desperate stranger, oblivious to the fact that she possesses the key to locating his long-lost son. Could their quest to mend a fractured family turn their practical union into an unforeseen bond? Crimson droplets fell from James Blackwood's battered knuckles onto the dusty road as he stumbled his way back from the Millfield saloon. The pain was undeniably real, a stark contrast to the hollow emptiness that consumed his chest each night. A distant bark of a dog echoed through the air. The moon loomed low above the rooftops, casting elongated shadows over the slumbering mining town. "You don't have any right to look at me like that," James muttered, recalling the barkeeper's expression when he had turned down another whiskey. In the town, a shared expression lingered among the people, an unsettling blend of pity and discomfort, as if he were a wounded creature they couldn't bear to end. The cottage loomed ahead, shrouded in darkness and devoid of warmth. 3 years stripped of laughter, 3 years absent of Olivia's radiant smile or Ethan's eager footsteps rushing to welcome him. James faltered on the front step, steadying himself against the doorframe. Within the confines of the room, the cold mirrored the October atmosphere outside. Days had passed without the warmth of a fire. He struggled with the lamp, his fingers, marked by coal, quivering as the flickering flame created haunting silhouettes throughout the space. Olivia's rocking chair stood silent by the cold hearth. Ethan's wooden horse rested neglected in the corner, accumulating dust. James found it unbearable to touch their belongings, as if doing so would wipe away the final evidence of their existence. "It should have been me," he murmured, settling into his chair. The illness had seized Olivia swiftly, far too swiftly for farewells. And what about Ethan? The young boy found himself at the county orphanage as James toiled through double shifts, striving to settle the mounting doctor bills. Then arrived the blaze, the devastating blaze that consumed half the structure and reduced it to mere ashes and lingering inquiries. James retrieved a wrinkled letter from his pocket, the very one he had held on to for 5 long years. "Regret to inform you, presumed among the missing, no remains identified." The words swam before his eyes as he read them for the 100th time. On certain nights, he envisioned Ethan having broken free, thriving in a new life with a loving family, filled with joy and completeness. Yet on other nights, the haunting visions of smoke and fire would wrench him from sleep, leaving him breathless in the shadows. A sudden knock pulled him from his thoughts. James cast a quick look at the small clock on the mantel, its hands nearing midnight. Who could possibly be visiting at such an hour? "Mr. Blackwood? Are you home?" The voice belonged to Reverend Logan, the young minister who had officiated Olivia's burial and conducted Ethan's memorial. James contemplated remaining silent, feigning sleep or absence. Instead, he pulled himself to the door, running a hand through his graying hair, once as black as coal when Olivia was alive, now streaked with ash at 36. "Reverend," James acknowledged, not fully opening the door. "It's late." "Indeed, and I apologize for the hour." The Reverend's face revealed concern beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "May I come in? There's been an incident at the station." James's curiosity eclipsed his wish for solitude. He took a step back, granting the Reverend access to the shadowy cottage. Trailing behind Logan was Sheriff Jackson, his badge glinting in the soft glow of the lamp. "What's this about?" James inquired, abruptly aware of his untidy look. Sheriff Jackson took off his hat. "A robbery has occurred at the station. A lady passenger from Boston had her purse stolen while she was waiting for someone to meet her. Everything is gone. Money, documents, all of it." James frowned. "I'm sorry to hear that, but how does it concern me?" Reverend Logan took a moment to clear his throat. "The individual in question is Miss Hannah Sullivan. Her father was my classmate from seminary many years back. She arrived here at my invitation, anticipating a teaching position at our school which was filled last month," the sheriff continued. "Mason's eldest girl accepted it. I was supposed to meet her tomorrow," the Reverend went on, his expression filled with shame. "I was completely unaware that she would be coming in on the late train. My wife and I have the parsonage bustling with my sister's family visiting from Philadelphia." James could feel the direction of the conversation. "And you want me to—" "What, precisely?" "Provide her with shelter," Reverend Logan stated straightforwardly. "Only for tonight. She can take my sister's room tomorrow." "But what about tonight?" Are you looking for a single woman to reside here? Are you with me? James let out a harsh laugh. Have you lost your mind, Reverend? You know how people gossip in this town. Sheriff Jackson shifted uneasily. It's only for one night, Blackwood. Unless you'd rather I lock her up next to drunken Duncan. James massaged his throbbing temples. Why me? Why not the Winters family? Mrs. Winters has a penchant for taking in strays. The Winters are currently in Harrisburg visiting their son, the Reverend elaborated. I implore you, James. She has no other place to turn. Is she really standing out there while you plead with others to take her in? James inquired, stepping closer to the window. Indeed, a delicate silhouette lingered beside the sheriff's wagon, her arms drawn closely around her to shield against the biting chill of the night. Her solitary silhouette, bathed in moonlight, evoked a distant memory. He stood outside the doctor's house the night Olivia died, reluctant to return to an empty home, burdened by the heavy realization of having nowhere to truly belong. One night, James declared with intensity, she occupies Ethan's former room. And you'll come to get her first thing tomorrow. A wave of relief swept across the Reverend's face. I appreciate it, James. I was certain we could rely on your goodwill. Don't confuse this with goodwill, James snapped. I understand the feeling of being lost and without a place to turn. That's all. The men moved to fetch the woman, while James quickly tidied up the old mining clothes from the cramped second bedroom. Years had passed since he last stepped inside, yet the delicate scent of lavender sachets crafted by Olivia lingered in the atmosphere. Ethan's wooden soldiers stood resolutely on the shelf, vigilantly watching over an unoccupied bed. Soft whispers drew near to the door. James adjusted his shirt, acutely aware of the coal dust embedded in the floorboards and the pile of unwashed dishes in the sink. What could she possibly think? Being compelled to stay with a stranger, a rugged miner with bruised knuckles and the scent of whiskey lingering in the air. Miss Sullivan, allow me to introduce you to Mr. James Blackwood, the Reverend said as they stepped inside. He's generously offered his spare room for the night. James glanced up, anticipating a reaction of fear or disgust from the woman. Instead, Hannah Sullivan met his gaze with a calm sense of dignity. She appeared younger than he had anticipated, likely around 30, with chestnut hair tightly secured beneath a simple bonnet. Her gray traveling dress bore the marks of a lengthy journey, yet she maintained a straight posture, her chin lifted slightly in defiance of her situation. I'm grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Blackwood, she remarked, her voice imbued with a touch of Eastern elegance yet free of any airs. I apologize for the imposition. Before James could reply, the Reverend and Sheriff exchanged hurried farewells, vowing to return in the morning, which left him alone with the stranger in his home. The silence lingered between them, interrupted solely by the ticking of the mantel clock. The room's through there, James eventually said, gesturing with a hint of awkwardness. It's not much, but it's tidy. Thank you. She paused, gripping her small remaining bag. I must inform you that I have very limited resources to repay your generosity. The thief made off with almost everything, James said, shaking his head. I'm not seeking any compensation. He shifted to tend to the long extinguished fire, needing a task for his hands. There's water in the pitcher if you wish to clean up. I'll be out here if you need anything. Hannah stepped toward the bedroom, but then hesitated. Mr. Blackwood. He raised his gaze from the hearth. I might be unfamiliar to you, yet I recognize the face of sorrow, she spoke gently. For the past few years, my father has maintained the same expression. At times, the most compassionate act we can offer one another is to seek no rewards. Before he had the chance to reply, she slipped into the bedroom, softly shutting the door behind her. James knelt by the fireplace, sensing that she had pierced through his soul in a manner no one had since Olivia's passing. As the initial flames licked at the kindling, James found himself pondering the dire circumstances that had led Hannah Sullivan to Millfield. He couldn't shake the feeling that her unassuming words had pried open a part of him he had meticulously kept locked away for years. The aroma of coffee roused James from a deep, dreamless slumber. For a fleeting instant, he imagined Olivia was in the kitchen, softly humming while she crafted breakfast. Then the truth came crashing down. The uncomfortable chair where he had drifted off, the stiffness in his neck, and the mysterious woman silently navigating his kitchen. Hannah Sullivan stood at the stove, her hair elegantly pinned back, clad in the same gray dress from the previous evening. She cast a quick look as he began to stir. "I trust this is all right," she remarked, indicating the coffee pot. "I thought it might help kick off the day." James pushed himself up, feeling a flush of embarrassment for being found dozing in his attire. "You didn't have to do that. It felt like the bare minimum I could offer." She filled a cup and extended it to him. As he took it, their fingers brushed, and he caught sight of a small ink stain on her right index finger, a mark of a teacher. The coffee was more delightful than anything he had brewed for himself in years. Outside, the mining whistle sounded, heralding the beginning of the day's shift. "I ought to start working," James remarked, becoming aware of his unshaven face and disheveled attire. "The Reverend will be by for you soon." Hannah nodded, a brief flicker of concern passing over her face before she regained her composure. "Of course. I've tidied up a little, if that's all right." For the first time, James observed the clean floor and the dishes drying by the sink. Minor adjustments transformed the cottage into a space that felt inviting and warm, rather than just a spot to rest between work shifts. "You didn't have to go through all that." "I just wanted to help," she answered plainly. A subtle hint of something lurking beneath her serene facade piqued his interest. Perhaps a sense of urgency. The expression of an individual striving intensely to validate their value. James paused at the threshold. "Miss Sullivan, if the Reverend doesn't arrive, I'll handle it," she interjected swiftly. "I always do." Meanwhile, at the mine, James found it hard to concentrate. His mind continually drifted back to Hannah Sullivan. Isolated in his cottage, accompanied solely by the lingering spirits of his family. After Foreman Jenkins raised his voice for the third time regarding his work, James resolved to take action. At midday, rather than joining the other miners for a meal, he hurried over to the parsonage. He discovered Reverend Logan in his study, appearing frazzled. "James, I was just about to reach out to you. There's been a complication." "What sort of complication?" James inquired, his suspicions already brewing. The Reverend let out a weary sigh, taking off his spectacles to wipe them with a hint of anxiety. "My sister's family will be here for another 2 weeks. Her husband has commitments in Pittsburgh, and she is unwilling to journey alone with the children. Therefore, Miss Sullivan cannot be accommodated. I've reached out to multiple families, but none appear to be in a position to welcome her. The boarding house is bustling with railroad workers, and Mrs. Clayton at the school is resolute in her desire to keep competition out of town." The Reverend appeared quite forlorn. If only the teaching position were available once more. Miss Sullivan possesses impressive qualifications. Her father made certain she obtained a top-notch education. James reflected on Hannah's meticulous actions as she navigated his kitchen. Her quiet dignity in the face of adversity is striking. The real concern is how long it will take for her to secure another position. With her references taken and winter on the horizon, it might be spring before a suitable opportunity arises. I've reached out to Boston for replacement documents, but these matters require patience. Reverend Logan gazed at James with a spark of hope. Unless... James recognized that expression. He had observed it reflected in the expressions of aspiring matchmakers throughout the town for years. Don't even consider it, Reverend. You have the room, James. The cottage offers 2 bedrooms. It wouldn't be appropriate. Which is exactly why I'm proposing something more enduring. The Reverend leaned in closer. Marriage, James. The term lingered in the atmosphere between them like coal dust before a cave-in. Have you completely lost it? James finally managed. Marry a woman I just met last night? Individuals enter into marriage for far more trivial motivations, the Reverend retorted. She requires stability. You must... He paused. What? What do you want? James insisted. What do I need? Not to feel alone anymore, Logan said softly. Everyone in town is concerned about you, James. The act of consuming beverages. The battles. Since Olivia and Ethan don't utter their names, James interjected abruptly, standing up from his seat. I refuse to wed a stranger simply because you have no place for her. Please, think it over, the Reverend urged as James marched angrily toward the door. Engage in conversation with her. Miss Sullivan approaches her circumstances with a pragmatic mindset. This doesn't have to be a romantic connection. Just a setup that serves us both. James halted at the entrance, his hand resting on the doorknob. And what advantage would I gain from such an arrangement? A dignified home once more, someone to tend to the cottage while you labor. Perhaps, the Reverend paused, perhaps even children someday. The suggestion struck James like a punch to the gut. Replace Ethan? The mere idea was sacrilege. I'll find somewhere else for her to stay, James stated icily, turning on his heel and departing in silence. He never went back to the mine. Instead, he strolled through the streets of Millfield, reminiscing about the time he first arrived with Olivia, brimming with optimism for what lay ahead. The town had expanded alongside the mine, featuring company houses, a well-established school, and 2 churches instead of just one. All were aware of each other's affairs. As darkness fell, it was certain that half the town would be aware of Miss Sullivan's overnight stay beneath his roof. The sun dipped below the horizon as James made his way back to the cottage. Smoke billowed from the chimney. She maintained the flames with unwavering dedication. Through the window, he observed Hannah at his table, engrossed in what seemed to be mending work, her expression intent in the glow of the lamplight. Something about the scene froze him in place. For 5 years he had plunged back into the depths of shadow and stillness. At that moment, there was a comforting glow, a sense of illumination, and the anticipation of another voice echoing through the space. The sight unsettled him more than he could have anticipated. Hannah glanced up at his arrival, pausing her sewing with a gentle motion. He noticed one of his shirts, the one with the ripped sleeve he had never taken the time to mend. "I hope you don't mind," she said, recalling her words from that morning. "I found your mending basket." James hung his coat by the door. "The Reverend won't be coming." Her hand froze, yet her face betrayed no emotion. "I see. His sister's family is extending their stay. There's no room for you at the parsonage." Hannah nodded slowly, taking in this information. "I understand. I'll gather my things and go where?" James inquired with a tone that was rougher than he had meant. She straightened her spine. "I still possess a handful of coins. Maybe the hotel." "The hotel refuses to accommodate a woman traveling alone without the necessary references," James interjected. "Not in this town." A brief flicker of fear crossed her face before she regained her composure. "Then I'll proceed to the next town. There's a westbound train tomorrow." "With what money? For what purpose? To knock on strangers' doors and hope for charity." The words escaped him more sharply than he meant. Hannah stood from the chair, her composure finally breaking. "What do you wish for me to do, Mr. Blackwood?" "Panhandle in the streets? Everything has slipped away from me. My father, my home, my future, my possessions. Yet I retain my dignity, and I refuse to intrude where I am unwelcome." Her passionate declaration left them both speechless. James was taken aback by the intensity hidden behind her serene facade. It brought back with a sharp pang the essence of Olivia's spirit. "The Reverend proposed a plan," he said at last, the words tasting odd on his tongue. Hannah's gaze sharpened just a bit. "What kind of arrangement?" James ran a hand through his hair, his gaze drifting away from her. "Marriage." The term lingered in the air, thick with meaning. Hannah gradually settled back into the chair, her expression inscrutable. "I understand," she replied once more, her tone steady. "A marriage of convenience." "I didn't suggest it," James replied hastily. "Yet he appears to believe it would resolve both of our issues. You need a place to stay." "I need—" He paused, uncertain of how to continue. "A housekeeper?" she replied, her voice laced with a touch of bitterness. "Company," James conceded, taken aback by the honesty of his own words. "The town whispers. They fret. If I were to have a wife once more, perhaps they'd cease regarding me as if I'm on the brink of plunging into a mine shaft." Hannah observed him, her keen eyes assessing his worth. "And what of affection, Mr. Blackwood?" "Regarding love?" James averted his gaze. "I laid those emotions to rest alongside my Olivia. I have nothing remaining to offer." "Then we are on the same page," she said softly. "I have no interest in romance either. My father's illness revealed to me that what truly matters in this world is security." His gaze shifted back to her face, seeking any signs of distress or resignation. Instead, he discovered a sharp, practical perspective. "So, you would think about it? Marrying a coal miner you've just met. I see it as a practical arrangement that offers security and direction," she clarified. "In return, I shall take care of your residence cook your meals, and uphold our reputation in the community. A fundamental agreement at its core. James was taken aback by the unexpected clarity of thought. "What about the children?" he inquired directly, reflecting the Reverend's earlier point. A shadow fell across Hannah's face. "My father's illness demanded attention these last 5 years. I am 32 years old, Mr. Blackwood. I've come to terms with certain truths." Her candid response rendered him speechless. The Reverend likely anticipated a response filled with tears and gratitude, but this was not it. A woman stood firm, fully aware of her offerings and the reciprocation she sought. "I ought to mention," James said gruffly, "that I indulge in drinking occasionally, perhaps more than is wise." "I observed, and I'm not really inclined towards conversation or attending church lately." Hannah clasped her hands in her lap. "I have no need for idle chatter, Mr. Blackwood, nor do I anticipate altering your ways. What I seek is merely a space in this world, and you are providing it." The sheer practicality of the situation resonated with James, evoking feelings of both admiration and profound sadness. Where was this woman's family located? Those companions of hers? How had she found herself in such solitude that the idea of marrying a stranger felt like a sensible decision? Just as he was about to voice any of these inquiries, a sudden knock echoed at the door. James opened the door to discover Mrs. Winters standing on his doorstep, her expression rigid with disapproval. "Mr. Blackwood," she said with a touch of formality, glancing beyond him to where Hannah was seated. "I've just come back from Harrisburg and have encountered the most remarkable rumors." "The Reverend informs me that Miss Sullivan is residing here," James said, a surge of irritation coursing through him at the unexpected news. "Miss Sullivan required a place to stay for the night." Mrs. Winters' eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Unaccompanied? In a single man's abode?" "Really, Mr. Blackwood, I would have thought better of you," came Hannah's voice, clear and composed from behind him. "Mrs. Winters, I assume? What a stroke of luck you've encountered. Mr. Blackwood has just bestowed upon me the delightful honor of proposing marriage. We were discussing the arrangements when you knocked." James turned in shock, yet Hannah's expression betrayed nothing but a serene confidence. She had made her choice, compelling his action before the town's whispers could escalate. Mrs. Winters' mouth dropped in astonishment. "Marriage? However, you have only recently become acquainted." "Sometimes," Hannah remarked, getting up to stand next to James, "one realizes swiftly the direction that fate has laid out for them." The older woman glanced between them, her suspicion battling with the thrill of being the first to receive such news. "Well, the Reverend said nothing of this when I visited the parsonage." "We've only just made our decision," James said, going along with Hannah's quick move. "Indeed, we were just about to reach out to Reverend Logan regarding a ceremony." Mrs. Winters tightened her grip on her shawl. "I understand. This certainly comes as a surprise. I will pray for your happiness," she said, her expression hinting that she anticipated anything but joy from such a rushed decision. Once she departed, James looked over at Hannah. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Hannah replied with unwavering resolve. "By noon tomorrow, everyone in town would know I spent 2 nights under your roof. My standing would be tarnished, and yours would come under scrutiny." "In this manner, we shape the story," James observed, taking in the unexpected resolve of the woman before him, who had just intertwined her destiny with his through a daring proclamation. "Are you sure this is what you desire?" Hannah surveyed the cozy cottage, her gaze drifting to Olivia's rocking chair, the toys of Ethan still strewn about in the corners, and the half-mended shirt resting on the table. Then she locked her gaze with his. "No, Mr. Blackwood, this isn't what either of us desires. Yet, life often presents us with necessities instead of wants." She extended her hand as if to finalize a transaction. "Should we pay a visit to the Reverend before Mrs. Winters arrives with the news?" James grasped her hand, noting the scholar's calluses on her fingertips, a stark contrast to Olivia's labor-worn palms. As they strolled toward the parsonage in the dimming light, he pondered Olivia's thoughts on this arrangement, questioning if he was betraying her memory or at last fulfilling her final whispered wish. "Exist, James. Don't leave me behind." The church bell's chime resonated throughout Millfield as Hannah adjusted James's collar. Her fingers moved swiftly with purpose, deliberately avoiding his gaze. 6 days. That was all it took from their initial encounter to this very moment. Here they were, in the parsonage parlor, on the brink of exchanging vows neither had anticipated uttering once more. "There," Hannah remarked, taking a step back to assess her creation. Presentable enough, James fidgeted awkwardly in his Sunday suit, excessively snug around the shoulders after being left untouched for years. "You don't have to go through with this." Hannah's expression stayed meticulously composed. "The arrangements are made. Mrs. Winters has already shared the news with half the town. We might consider departing. Begin anew in a different place." A slight crease formed between her brows, the sole fissure in her facade. "And confront the same issues in another place? No, Mr. Blackwood. This presents the most pragmatic resolution." The door swung open just as James was about to reply. Reverend Logan stepped in, a prayer book clutched in his hand. His wife trailed behind, clutching a small bouquet of late autumn flowers. "A few neighbors have gathered," the Reverend remarked, his smile a touch too bright. "News spreads quickly in Millfield." Naturally it did. James envisioned the murmurs that would ensue. The sorrowful youth who wed an unfamiliar face. The destitute educator willing to embrace the unexpected. He cast a sidelong look at Hannah, pondering the thoughts concealed beneath her meticulously upheld composure. The ceremony unfolded in under 15 minutes. James recited the well-known phrases with a sense of detachment. His thoughts drifted to a different wedding day. Olivia wore her mother's dress, her smile radiant enough to illuminate the deepest mine shaft. As he placed the simple gold band onto Hannah's finger, his mother's ring, the sole treasure he clung to, her hand quivered just a bit, even with her calm demeanor. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Logan announced to the intimate crowd of intrigued witnesses. Silence filled the air. A handful of women gently wiped away tears from their eyes. James found himself uncertain, caught between emotion and compassion. The journey home unfolded in an uncomfortable hush. Hannah matched his stride effortlessly, their new wedding band glimmering in the faint December sunlight. As they moved through town, neighbors exchanged nods, their curious gazes tracking every step they took. "We're quite the spectacle," Hannah noted softly. "They'll discover something new to chatter about before long," James responded. At the cottage doorstep, James paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. A vague recollection of a wedding custom lingered in his mind, something concerning thresholds. Just as he was about to remember, Hannah moved past him and entered the house, effortlessly resolving the situation. Within the cottage, there was an unmistakable change in atmosphere. Since Hannah's arrival, subtle transformations had taken place in the space. The floors shone brightly, polished to perfection, free from the remnants of years of coal dust. The windows gleamed, allowing in more light than James could recall. Olivia's rocking chair sat comfortably in a snug corner by the fire, a mending basket placed beside it as though it had always found its home there. "I trust the changes are acceptable to you," Hannah remarked, catching his eye. "I needed something to do while waiting." "It's your home now, too," James replied, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. An uneasy silence settled around them. They were married, yet felt like strangers, tied together by obligation and circumstance rather than love. "I'll get supper ready," Hannah said at last, taking off her bonnet and gloves. "I'll fetch more firewood," James replied, thankful for an excuse to venture outside once more. That evening, they kept to their separate bedrooms as planned. James lay awake, attuned to the strange sounds of another presence in his home. Beyond the wall, he heard the gentle creak of a bed, followed by an unsettling silence. He pondered whether Hannah was also awake, contemplating the choices that had led her here. As dawn approached, James quietly got up and put on his clothes for the mine. In the kitchen, he discovered a lunch pail ready and waiting on the table, next to a pot of coffee that was still warm from the embers. A neatly written note rested against the cup. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. I wasn't certain when you would depart. I trust this is timely enough." The sheer consideration of it took him by surprise. He had become so used to looking after himself, to anticipating nothing, that this minor act felt oddly invasive, a reminder that his life of solitude had come to a close. The mine engulfed James for 12 hours, the familiar shadows providing solace amidst the disquieting changes at home. Naturally, his fellow miners were aware of the wedding. "So Blackwood's tied the knot," Jim Fuller remarked during their short respite, his tone a mix of praise and teasing. And she's a looker, or so they say. James concentrated on his meal, dismissing the remarks around him. I heard she's got an education, another miner chimed in. What does she want with a coal man? Let him be, old Harris grumbled. A man deserves a bit of happiness after all he's endured. Happiness. The word resonated in James's thoughts as he made his way back down into the mine shaft. Was that the promise of this arrangement? He had abandoned the notion of happiness the day they laid Olivia to rest. This marriage was a matter of survival for both him and Hannah. As James made his way back to the cottage that evening, the warm glow of lamplight spilled through the windows. There at the table he spotted Hannah engrossed in a stack of papers. He lingered for a moment, observing her intently. This unfamiliar woman who had become his wife. Her hair had slipped free from its pins, cascading in a chestnut veil as she toiled. For a brief instant, she glanced up from her work, her expression unmasked, betraying a flicker of concern before she caught sight of him at the window and swiftly arranged her demeanor. James stepped inside, draping his coat over the door. The cozy atmosphere of the cottage enveloped him, accompanied by the delightful aroma of beef stew. You're back, Hannah remarked, organizing the papers into a tidy pile. I trust stew will do, Mrs. Logan said as she placed some vegetables on the table. Stew is perfectly fine, James answered, rinsing his hands at the basin, conscious of the persistent coal dust that never seemed to wash away. What are you working on? Hannah paused, uncertainty flickering across her face. Lesson plans. Old habits, I guess. For when Mrs. Clayton's position becomes available? Maybe. She served him stew from the pot. Even though Mrs. Logan indicated that the mining company could require a clerk for their office, someone capable of managing accounts and drafting correspondence, James gazed up in astonishment. You'd do that. Hannah held his gaze firmly. I would do whatever it takes to support this household. I won't be a burden. You're not a burden, James replied instinctively, yet the words felt empty. Wasn't that precisely how he'd viewed her when the Reverend first proposed this arrangement? A burden he had accepted out of compassion? They dined in silence, the ticking of the mantel clock signaling the flow of time. This was marriage, James reflected darkly. Two strangers sharing meals and living quarters, tied together by practicality rather than affection. After supper, Hannah retrieved a Bible, not the dust-covered one belonging to James, but her own well-loved edition. Would you mind if I read? She inquired. Every evening it was a tradition of my father's. James shrugged. Do as you please. Her voice resonated through the cottage as she read, clear and steady, breathing life into the familiar verses that James hadn't heard since his childhood. He found himself drawn in despite his intentions, observing her face in the lamplight as she found solace in the ancient words. When she finished, Hannah gently closed the book. My father held the conviction that, even in our bleakest times, we are being shaped for something beyond our current understanding. She gazed at James. What transpired with your son, Mr. Blackwood? The inquiry took him by surprise. Since that fleeting conversation on the initial night, Ethan had not been mentioned again. Why do you ask? Because his absence permeates this house, Hannah replied with a quiet sincerity. And since I ought to be familiar with the family I've become a part of, even in these conditions. James gazed into the flames, contemplating how much to reveal. At last, he started to speak, his words emerging slowly at first, then picking up speed, describing Olivia's sickness, the urgent financial struggles, and the decision to send Ethan to the county orphanage, just temporarily, until circumstances got better. The blaze that ravaged the structure one evening as James toiled through the late hours. They never found his body, James concluded, his voice gravelly. Some children managed to get away. They were never certain about the identity of the one who had vanished. For months, I scoured the neighboring towns, filled with hope. He fell silent, unable to go on. Hannah's expression revealed no sympathy, just a deep comprehension that stung even more. How old would he be now? 10, James replied. He'd be 10 years old. Hannah nodded slowly, taking in this detail. I appreciate you sharing that with me, she replied softly. Understanding enables us to prevent inflicting unwarranted suffering on others. As she stood to get ready for bed, James softly grasped her wrist. "Hannah." She glanced down at him, taken aback by the use of her first name. "What made you agree to this marriage?" he asked. "The truth." Hannah's eyes held steady, "for I can spot desperation when it crosses my path, Mr. Blackwood. And sometimes the drowning save each other." Long after she had retreated to her room, James lingered by the fading fire, contemplating her words. The drowning saving each other. Was that truly their reality? And if it was, would they lift one another up, or pull each other further down? Outside, the February winds howled around the small schoolhouse as Hannah tightened her shawl. Inside, 20 children from the mining families gathered around the stove, their fingers red and cold as they clutched their primers. "Sound it out, Peter!" Hannah offered support as a young boy grappled with his letters. "Keep in mind what we went over yesterday." Peter Mason, the son of a coal miner, bore his father's stubborn jaw as he frowned at the page. "Sati. Feline. Wonderful." Hannah beamed, transitioning to the next child. After 2 months of informal lessons in her kitchen, she found herself presented with this chance, stepping in for Mrs. Clayton, who had welcomed her baby earlier than expected. The usual instructor wouldn't be back until spring, offering Hannah a chance for temporary work and a sense of purpose beyond her marriage. Hannah glanced out the window and spotted James making his way to the mine entrance, lunch pail in hand. Even from afar, his stance defined him, shoulders subtly curved, as though he was always preparing for an impending collapse. They had fallen into a disquieting pattern since their wedding in December. Courteous interactions, distinct spaces, meals were shared, yet the dialogue stayed on the surface. A union in title, where both feigned fulfillment of their desires. At times, Hannah noticed James observing her with a mysterious look, as if he were attempting to decipher a riddle. In those fleeting, unguarded moments, she caught herself observing him as well. "Madam Blackwood?" A faint voice drew her focus back to the classroom. "Indeed, Sarah." The young girl raised her slate high. "Is this correct?" Hannah concentrated on the unsteady figures, banishing any thoughts of James from her mind. This modest teaching role provided her with her initial experience of autonomy since her arrival in Millfield. The meager amount it provided was stored in a tin box she hid under her bed, protection from the unpredictable future that lay ahead. As the final bell rang, Hannah lingered in the classroom, diligently crafting lessons for the next day. Snow started to drift down outside, heavy flakes dancing in the deepening twilight. She was oblivious to the passage of time until a knock echoed through the schoolhouse door. "Step inside," she beckoned, anticipating the arrival of a mother retrieving a misplaced lunch pail. Instead, Foreman Jenkins stepped in, taking off his hat. His expression sent a shiver down Hannah's spine before he uttered a word. "Madam Blackwood, an incident has occurred at the mine." The world shifted askew. Hannah clutched the edge of her desk tightly. "Is that you, James?" "He's alive," Jenkins stated hurriedly. "However, hurt. Caven ensnared 3 men. Your husband assisted in their escape just before the support beams collapsed." Hannah snatched her shawl, her heart racing. "Where could he be?" "Doc Martin's?" "I came right away to get you." The journey to the doctor's house unfolded amidst a whirlwind of swirling snow and tumultuous thoughts. What was it that made her care so deeply? Their union was merely a transaction, devoid of any deeper connection. Her hands quivered with anticipation as Jenkins rapped on the doctor's door. Dr. Martin, an elderly gentleman with gentle eyes, welcomed them inside. "Madam Blackwood, your spouse is in the back room. Shattered ribs, shoulders out of joint, yet he will heal." The sensation of relief left Hannah's knees trembling. "Could I have a moment to see him?" James reclined on a slender examination table, his complexion pale under the layers of coal dust. Eyes shut tight, his shirt lay in tatters, exposing the dark purple bruises that fanned out across his chest and shoulder. One hand was wrapped in bandages while the other rested unguarded at his side. Hannah advanced quietly, careful not to disturb him if he had finally found solace in slumber. His eyelids gently parted as she drew near. "Is that you, Hannah?" His voice carried the weight of suffering. "I'm here," she murmured, hesitating to reach for his hand. James resolved her predicament by extending his hand toward her, his fingers enveloping hers with unexpected firmness. "What about the others?" From the doorway, Dr. Martin replied, Two made it out. Harris did not. You exhausted every option, Blackwood. James shut his eyes once more, sorrow enveloping his expression. Insufficient. Hannah clasped his hand softly. The foreman mentioned that you saved 2 lives. At the expense of another. Dr. Martin prepared to speak, his throat clearing in anticipation. He requires some time to recuperate. It will be several weeks before he is able to return to work. He can go home now, but assistance will be necessary. You really ought to avoid lifting anything, especially with those ribs of yours. The true implications of that realization settled in. Weeks of missed income. James requires assistance. Maintaining their careful distance would prove to be unfeasible. I see, Hannah replied, her thoughts swiftly assessing the contents of her tin box, pondering their next steps. Bringing James back through the relentless snowstorm drained every ounce of Hannah's energy. He leaned against her with great weight, every step a clear struggle, though he tried to mask the pain. Within the cottage, the flames had dwindled to mere embers. Bedroom, Hannah instructed, leading him to his room. It's time for you to rest. I can rest in the chair, James insisted softly. Don't be foolish, Hannah replied, her tone brooking no dissent. It's essential to ensure you get adequate rest. After ensuring James was comfortably positioned on the bed, Hannah tended to the fire, concocted a soothing tisane for his pain as her father had instructed, and collected fresh cloths to cleanse the coal dust from his skin. It was only after she had finished these practical tasks that she permitted herself to reflect on their changed situation. James observed her movements, noting that the mine would offer some compensation. It's not a lot, but it's definitely something. Hannah nodded, carefully lifting the steaming cup to his bedside. I have accumulated some savings from my teaching endeavors. We will handle it. James's gaze sharpened. Have you been putting money aside? Certainly, Hannah responded with a straightforward tone. It is essential to always be ready for challenges. A flicker of respect appeared on his face, consistently pragmatic. Need fosters practicality. Hannah assisted him in sitting up, her hand gently cradling his back to provide support as he took a drink. The closeness of the moment was undeniable, her fingers sensing the warmth of his skin beneath the delicate fabric of the shirt Dr. Martin had given him. James sipped cautiously, grimacing as each gulp jostled his ribs. As he completed his task, Hannah reached for the cup, their fingers lightly grazing against each other. What prompted you to take that action? She inquired abruptly. Return to the others when the supports began to falter. James appeared taken aback by the inquiry. Was it impossible to abandon them, despite the looming threat? Particularly at that moment. His gaze locked onto hers, a sudden intensity cutting through his suffering. Do you believe I'm seeking danger? It was not a question. Hannah placed the cup down, selecting her words with precision. It seems to me that you may not hold your life in the same regard as others do. Does that trouble you? A note of defiance laced his voice now. It complicates our arrangement, Hannah responded, leaning into practicality. My ability to contribute hinges on your presence and participation. James examined her features closely. Is that the sole reason? The inquiry lingered in the air between them, challenging a reality Hannah wasn't ready to confront. Before she could craft a reply, James's expression twisted in agony as he adjusted his position. Hannah remarked that you require some rest, appreciative of the disruption. Let's talk about this tomorrow. However, James seized her wrist just as she was about to walk away. Hannah. She glanced over her shoulder, discovering his gaze more vivid than it had ever been, suffering peeling back the typical defenses. Thank you, he stated plainly, for being here. To assist. We made a promise, Hannah reminded him, delicately pulling her wrist away. For better or worse. A fleeting smile graced his lips. Indeed, we did. That night, Hannah tossed and turned in her small bedroom, straining to hear any signs of trouble from James. Their meticulous setup had been thrown into disarray, compelling them into an unexpected closeness. In just one evening, she had connected with him more than they had in 2 months of being married. Wished I had expressed myself more candidly, had experienced more. As dawn approached, Hannah stirred awake to the sound of James's voice echoing through the stillness. Not for her, but for him. The name escaped his lips in the depths of slumber, heavy with sorrow. Hannah stood up instinctively and approached his door, gently easing it open. James writhed feebly in the bed, ensnared in a nightmare, his wounded ribs restricting his movements. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, even with the chill in the room. "Ethan!" he called once more, the name faltering in the midst. Hannah approached his bedside, gently resting a cool hand on his forehead. "Shoo," she comforted. "It's merely a vision of what could be." James froze at her touch, his eyes fluttering open yet lacking clarity. Olivia, the name of his late wife, struck Hannah with an unexpected intensity. "No," she replied gently. "Greetings, it's Hannah." A moment of bewilderment crossed his features before clarity set in once more. "Hannah," he echoed, as though trying the name on for size. "I found myself lost in a dream." "I understand," she replied. "Make sure to take some time to relax." As she began to walk away, James reached out and grasped her hand. "Stay," he murmured softly. "Kindly." Hannah paused for just a moment before moving the rocking chair nearer to his bedside. She remained seated, her hand intertwined with his. "I will remain here until you drift off to sleep." James's eyelids fluttered shut, his breaths becoming more even and calm. Even after his hold had loosened, Hannah stayed, observing the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, disturbed by the strange feelings awakening inside her. This was outside the bounds of their agreement. Their union was intended to be pragmatic, detached, a remedy for shared challenges. Yet here she sat, grasping the hand of a slumbering man, enveloped in a sense of guardianship and an emotion teetering on the edge of affection. As the first light of dawn seeped into the room, Hannah gently withdrew her hand and made her way back to her own bed. Whatever was unfolding between them, she couldn't allow herself to scrutinize it too deeply, not while her genuine mission in Millfield lingered incomplete. A hidden truth she bore like a weight in her chest, becoming more burdensome with every day of falsehood. "A letter addressed to you, Mrs. Blackwood." Hannah lifted her gaze from her desk in the schoolhouse to spot Jimmy Wells, the postmaster's son, extending an envelope towards her. Her heart raced at the glimpse of the Pittsburgh postmark. "Thank you, Jimmy," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she took it from him. The boy hesitated, evidently anticipating a copper penny for his efforts. Hannah rummaged through her pocket and discovered one, prompting him to skip away with a beaming, gap-toothed smile. She gazed at the letter, hesitant to unveil its contents. "After 3 months of reaching out to orphanages and children's homes throughout Pennsylvania, I was met only with disappointment. This recent response from a Catholic orphanage in Pittsburgh could very well be similar. Outside, the March winds shook the windows of the schoolhouse. The temporary teaching position transformed into a permanent role when Mrs. Clayton chose not to return following the birth of her baby. Hannah's modest income provided support throughout James's prolonged recovery, which was extending beyond what they had anticipated. Though his ribs had mended, the doctor from the mining company remained concerned about his respiratory health. The dust from the cave-in had aggravated the coal already settled in his lungs. Hannah carefully tucked the letter into her sleeve. "It's best to enjoy it in the comfort of your own space, far from prying gazes." She refocused on grading the arithmetic lessons, yet her mind wandered repeatedly to the concealed envelope. In the comfort of his home, James positioned himself by the window, skillfully carving a small wooden horse. The weeks of mandatory downtime had proven challenging for him. A man used to hard work finds himself unexpectedly limited to the cottage. Hannah stumbled upon his talent for carving quite unexpectedly, uncovering old toys he had crafted for Ethan. Urging him to revisit it had instilled a sense of purpose in him throughout his recovery. "How did the kids do today?" he inquired, glancing upwards as she made her entrance. The straightforward nature of the question caused Hannah to hesitate. Amidst the months spent tending to James, assisting him with dressing when his shoulder faltered, and sharing stories during the lengthy evenings by the fire, an unspoken change had taken root between them. The measured space had diminished. They continued to keep separate bedrooms, yet the cottage had shed its previous sense of division between his space and hers. "The typical blend of enthusiastic and hesitant academics," Hannah responded, taking off her shawl. "Peter Mason has successfully conquered his letters." James nodded, resuming his meticulous carving. "His father is sure to be delighted. Jims has always aspired for greater opportunities for his son, beyond the confines of mining." Hannah immersed herself in the task of preparing supper. the letter searing against her skin where it lay concealed. It was only when James ventured outside to gather firewood that she swiftly seized it, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Dear Mrs. Blackwood, it has commenced. Thank you for your inquiry regarding the children who were relocated after the Westmoreland County Orphanage fire in 1880. We have reviewed our records as you requested. A boy fitting your description was certainly brought to our attention by Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Hannah's breath hitched. After months of fruitless searches, she had finally found a lead. The correspondence went on. The Carters had once envisioned adopting the child, yet circumstances shifted when Mr. Carter lost his job, leaving them unable to care for him. 3 years ago, the boy made his way to St. Mary's home in Harrisburg. Your inquiry has been forwarded to them, and their direction is included below. Hannah clutched the letter to her chest, her heart pounding with anticipation. Is it possible that it's Ethan? The timing was perfect. In the midst of the chaos that ensued after the fire, the Carters welcomed a boy into their home, a boy whose appearance aligned with what James had described about his son. The door swung open as James came back, his arms laden with wood. Hannah quickly shoved the letter into her pocket, a rush of guilt coloring her cheeks. How could she reveal to him that she had been searching all along, unbeknownst to him, that she had remembered Ethan's name from her experience as a teacher's assistant at that same orphanage, that she had arrived in Millfield not solely for the teaching role, but because she had been pursuing a lead that had faded away? Hannah, James's voice interrupted her reverie. Are you feeling unwell? Your cheeks are rosy, only the warmth radiating from the stove. She deceived, pivoting back to the pot she was mixing. The burden of her secrets pressed down like a leaden weight in her gut. With each passing day, the weight of the unspoken truth grew heavier, making confession increasingly difficult. That evening, once James had settled into his room, Hannah positioned herself at the kitchen table, crafting a reply to St. Mary's home. She had to tread lightly, seeking information while keeping her cards close to her chest. If this boy was indeed Ethan, she sought complete assurance before allowing James to entertain hopes that could be shattered. A floorboard let out a soft groan behind her. Hannah jumped, swiftly shielding her manuscript with a book. Unable to find rest, James inquired, lingering in the threshold of his bedroom. In the soft glow of the lamplight, she noticed his frail frame, the sharp outline of his collarbone visible beneath the fabric of his nightshirt. As she wrapped up her schoolwork, Hannah responded, feeling a deep disdain for how effortlessly deceit now slipped from her tongue. James approached the stove, placing a small log to ensure the fire would last through the night. You put in too much effort, remarked the man who almost sacrificed his life for others. Hannah replied with a faint smile. James's gaze locked onto hers, earnest even in the midst of her playful demeanor. I've been reflecting on that, on what you mentioned. What did I express? I perceive my life as having less value compared to others. He positioned himself opposite her at the table. You were correct. Hannah paused her writing, focusing entirely on him. These instances of vulnerability from James were infrequent, invaluable treasures. Following Olivia's passing and Ethan's disappearance, he pressed on, feeling that there was little reason to care about his own existence. The mine served as a fitting spot to bide time until the inevitable conclusion arrived. And now, Hannah asked softly. James studied his hands. Hands of a craftsman, she realized, not merely those of a miner, capable of creating beauty as well as extracting coal from the earth. Now I find myself uncertain, he confessed, over these last few months. As I arrived home, I found him looking up, our eyes locking in a moment of connection. It holds significance. Hannah experienced a constriction in her chest. How could she keep up the facade with this man who was finally starting to embrace life once more? But how could she reveal that she had been probing secretly, fostering hopes that could ultimately be unfulfilled? The company's doctor has cleared me to return to work next week, James said, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within her. Not in the depths just yet, but still above the surface. While the compensation is lower, the safety is greater. That's wonderful news, Hannah remarked, genuinely feeling it even though her mind was elsewhere. Your influence is the reason behind this. James's hand glided over the table, hovering just above hers, yet not making contact. Your presence has made me more cautious. The straightforward confession lingered in the space, altering the atmosphere within the cozy cottage. Hannah felt the weight of solitude pressing in on her, the late hour wrapping them in a closeness that the brightness of day would have shattered. "James," she started, unsure of how to express her thoughts. He rose suddenly, as if acutely aware of the delicate nature of the moment. "Sweet dreams, Hannah. Be sure to wrap up your work at a reasonable hour." Once he had left, Hannah gazed at her unfinished letter, then shifted her gaze to the shut door of James's room. When did this arrangement, this marriage of convenience, transform into something she dreaded losing? What would become of this delicate trust when her secrets were inevitably revealed? The following morning, Hannah strolled to the post office prior to school, sending off her letter to Harrisburg. As spring gently caressed the Pennsylvania hillsides, an unusual blend of anticipation and apprehension blossomed within her. She observed James with increasing intensity, perceiving him in a fresh light each day as he gathered strength, as vitality slowly rekindled in his gaze. One evening, as she returned from school, Hannah discovered James engaged in a lively discussion with Reverend Logan at their kitchen table. The men grew quiet as she walked in, a clear indication that their conversation was not intended for her to hear. She acknowledged the Reverend, taking off her shawl. "This is a delightful surprise." "Mrs. Blackwood," he acknowledged with a nod. "I was just having a conversation with your husband. Matters of the church." James's face was a mask as the Reverend bid his farewells. It was only in solitude that he found his voice. "The Reverend delivered word of a mining mishap in a nearby town," James articulated, observing her intently. "A fire at an orphanage was noted. It felt like something I had encountered before." Hannah felt a chill run through her veins. "Which orphanage are you referring to?" "Westmoreland County." 5 years prior, James's gaze was unwaveringly fixed on her face. "The Reverend recalled my loss and believed I might wish to support the families impacted by this recent tragedy." Hannah occupied herself with the kettle, attempting to conceal her quivering hands. "How considerate of him." "Hannah!" James's voice halted her actions. Upon uttering Ethan's name, the Reverend displayed the most peculiar response. "He mentioned that you had inquired about the Westmoreland fire several months back prior to our marriage, and that you had specifically asked about any children who may have managed to escape." The kettle slipped from Hannah's fingers, clattering against the stove, yet fortunately, it did not spill. She pivoted gradually to confront him, deciphering the bewilderment and emerging doubt reflected in his gaze. "What makes you curious about that fire, Hannah?" James inquired softly. "What made you inquire about missing children before you had any understanding of who I am?" The time Hannah had feared for months had finally come. All secrets are out in the open. Enough with the avoidance. Just as she began to articulate her thoughts, a sudden, forceful knock echoed through the room. James maintained her gaze for a brief moment before responding. Foreman Jenkins lingered at their doorstep, his hat clutched in his hands. "Blackwood, a collapse has occurred in the northern shaft. Men ensnared. We require all hands on deck for the rescue effort." James faced Hannah again, the turmoil evident on his expression, the quest for clarity clashing with the pressing nature of the circumstances. "Go," Hannah whispered gently. "We'll have a conversation when you come back." As James reached for his coat, he hesitated next to her. Hannah nodded in agreement, sealing the promise. Words lodged in her throat as she observed him rush into the encroaching twilight. The truth would linger for a few more hours. Yet, as she observed his fading silhouette, a question lingered in her mind. Would the delicate balance of their shared existence endure this challenge? The mud clung to James's boots as he assisted in carrying an injured miner from the collapsed shaft. The rain poured relentlessly for hours, transforming the rescue mission into a fierce struggle against the elements of earth and water. Each breath ignited a fire in his lungs, a stark reminder of his incomplete recovery. The company doctor would surely be furious for joining the rescue crew, yet James refused to remain idle while others were ensnared. "That's the final one!" Foreman Jenkins shouted, his voice struggling to break through the relentless rain. 7 are accounted for, while 2 remain missing. James brushed the rain from his eyes, peering into the shadows ahead. "Are we certain?" "Only one." Jenkins shook his head with a heavy heart. "The shafts are now entirely obstructed. If McGuire and Donovan remain inside—" He left the thought hanging in the air. A surge of fatigue washed over James as the adrenaline ebbed away. He had been laboring for almost 6 hours without pause, disregarding the complaints of his recovering body. At this early hour, under the muted light of dawn, he was acutely aware of each bruise, each strain. Yet, an additional force compelled him to navigate the muddy, rain-soaked path back home. Hannah's expression when he confronted her about the orphanage fire, the astonishment, the remorse, and an additional feeling lurking beneath the surface. Dread? Melancholy? He was unable to identify it. However, he realized that their discussion was urgent and could no longer be postponed. As James stepped inside, the cottage lay in quiet stillness, droplets of rainwater cascading from him onto the pristine floor. He anticipated that Hannah would be fast asleep at this early hour. She remained at the kitchen table, fully dressed, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea. Her complexion was ashen, with her eyes darkened from a long night of anticipation. "What about the men?" she inquired right away. "5 individuals have sustained injuries, while 2 others are unaccounted for and presumed deceased," James replied, shedding his drenched coat. "The rest will bounce back." Hannah acknowledged with a nod, getting up to tend to the smoldering fire. "You'll want to have dry clothes and a warm beverage to enjoy." James seized her arm as she walked by. "Hannah, we should have a conversation." She remained passive, yet he sensed the tightness in her form. "Absolutely we do. What prompted your inquiry about the Westmoreland fire?" James reiterated his inquiry from the night before. "What prompted your inquiries about missing children prior to your arrival in Millfield?" Hannah inhaled deeply, as if summoning her inner strength. "It's due to my experience there, James. I was instructing at the Westmoreland County Orphanage when it caught fire." The revelation struck James with the force of a punch to the heart. He let go of her arm, swaying a bit. "Were you present? That fateful night of the blaze?" Hannah nodded, her gaze fixed intently on his face. "I had been brought on board as a teacher's assistant just 3 weeks prior. As the flames erupted, I took charge of guiding the children to safety. Amidst the chaos, numerous individuals were taken in by wandering families before accurate documentation could be established." James's thoughts whirled as he struggled to make sense of this information. Were you aware of Ethan?" "My child," Hannah responded thoughtfully, avoiding the use of names. "Not at that time. A boy bore a crescent-shaped birthmark beneath his right ear. A couple journeying west took him with them." James instinctively reached for his ear, where a similar crescent mark lay concealed beneath his hair. A legacy handed down from father to son. "Ethan bore a distinct mark," he murmured. "I understand." Hannah approached the modest desk that housed her teaching resources. From a secured drawer, she retrieved a collection of letters. "I have been corresponding with orphanages along the probable paths since prior to my arrival in Millfield." Throughout this period, James sensed an unsettling instability beneath his feet. "So, you've been looking for my son without informing me?" Hannah extended the letters with a quivering hand. "Initially, I had no idea you were his father. When the Reverend requested my presence that first night, he merely noted that you had experienced the loss of a child. It was upon viewing Ethan's portrait that the connection became clear to me." James picked up the letters, his eyes widening in disbelief as he examined the first one. "What's the reason for the secrecy? Why not share it with me?" "I was afraid," Hannah admitted, her composure finally breaking down. "Concerned about creating unrealistic expectations. Worried you might believe I married you due to your link to the boy, that I had somehow twisted the circumstances to my advantage." James settled into a chair, the gravity of her words and the potential they held pressing down on him. "Have you located him?" he inquired, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Hannah knelt beside his chair, her expression glowing with tentative optimism. "I think that's the case. A boy who fit Ethan's description was taken in by a family called Carter. He was cared for over a span of 2 years, until financial difficulties compelled them to relocate him to another orphanage in Harrisburg. I have composed a message to verify that it is indeed him. We are currently awaiting their response." James gazed at her, a tumult of feelings clashing inside him. Fury at the betrayal, a yearning belief that his son could still be out there, and confusion surrounding Hannah's involvement in the entire situation. "What is the reason?" he inquired at last. "What would motivate you to take this action? Spend years seeking a child you hardly knew." Hannah gazed at her hands tightly clasped together, Following the fire, rest eluded me, and food lost its appeal. The images of those missing children lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of their absence. I accepted a role at my father's church school, yet in every free moment, I immersed myself in writing letters and chasing down rumors. As my father faced illness, I devoted myself to his care, while persistently seeking opportunities whenever I could. She lifted her eyes, locking onto James's gaze with unwavering intensity. Upon his passing, I found myself adrift, with no place to turn. The Reverend's letter extending an invitation for a teaching role in Millfield felt serendipitous, an opportunity to persist in my exploration of the region where one of the families had been journeying. "Was our marriage merely a convenience for your quest?" James inquired, a fresh heart blossoming. "No." Hannah extended her hand toward his but hesitated before making contact. "Absolutely not, James. Our union was precisely as we had envisioned, a mutually advantageous setup for our benefit. My quest for the lost children concerning your Ethan was distinct, a commitment I established with myself long ago." James rose suddenly, craving space to gather his thoughts. The discovery that Hannah had been at the orphanage might have indicated that Ethan's son, whom he thought was lost to him forever, was still alive. The weight of it all was overwhelming. "I need air," he said gruffly, heading for the door. "James, if you would be so kind." Hannah's voice brought him to a halt. "I realize I should have shared this with you earlier. I should not have hidden this from you. However, we may finally have an opportunity to locate him. To welcome your son back home." James glanced over his shoulder, noticing the urgency etched in her expression, the heartfelt remorse. "What makes it possible for me to believe anything you say at this point? This secret has been the foundation of our entire marriage." "Not the whole of our marriage," Hannah responded gently. "The basis could have been functional. However, what we have created over the last few months, the attention, the regard, She paused for a moment, then pressed on with greater conviction. "That has been genuine, James. For me, at the very least." Just as James was about to reply, a sudden, forceful knock echoed through the room. Hannah opened it to discover Jimmy Wells once more, clutching yet another letter. "Here's your special delivery, Mrs. Blackwood," the boy declared with great significance. "From Harrisburg, all the way. Mother mentioned to deliver it promptly since you've been inquiring about it." Hannah expressed her gratitude with another penny, then remained still, clutching the envelope, her hands trembling noticeably. She gazed at James, a query reflected in her eyes. "Open it," he urged, his voice thick with feeling. The letter was concise, yet its message transformed everything. The director of St. Mary's Home verified that a boy fitting Ethan's description, including his age, appearance, and the unique crescent birthmark, had been under their care until just recently. The boy frequently spoke of his father, a coal miner, who would one day come for him. Notably, the boy had been placed only 2 months prior with a farming family located outside Cleveland. "He's alive," James murmured, the world spinning around him. "My son is thriving." Hannah's eyes brimmed with tears. "Indeed." James reclined into the chair, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. 5 years steeped in sorrow, burdened by guilt, and haunted by the belief that his son was gone for good, and now, out of nowhere, this unexpected, miraculous glimmer of hope. "We must make our way to him. I need to witness it firsthand." "We will," Hannah assured, "as soon as the roads are clear once more." James gazed at her, perceiving her in a fresh light, not merely the pragmatic partner he had wed for convenience, but a woman who had devoted years to the search for lost children, who had quietly labored to bring him back together with his son. "Why didn't you share this with me earlier?" he inquired once more, grappling with his confusion. Hannah sat opposite him, her expression unguarded in a manner it had never been previously. "Due to my fear." "What do you mean?" "Of offering you a glimmer of hope that may ultimately disappoint. That you think I somehow orchestrated this marriage." She hesitated, the fragility evident in her gaze. "And recently, of the possibility of losing what we've created together." The revelation lingered in the space between them, altering the atmosphere of the cozy cottage. James examined her features, the features that had grown so recognizable over the past few months. The woman who tended to him during his injury, who rekindled the warmth in his home, who had seemingly been on a quest for his lost son even before their paths crossed. "What precisely have we created, Hannah?" he inquired softly. She held his gaze with unwavering resolve. "I'm uncertain, but it exceeds what we had settled on that day in December." James nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the validity of her statements. Their pragmatic setup had transformed into an outcome neither had foreseen, a collaboration rooted in mutual respect, communal meals and dialogues, along with small acts of kindness and thoughtfulness. Not love, maybe, but a spark that could eventually blossom into it. James decided that we would depart for Cleveland as soon as the weather improves. Hannah's relief was evident, her shoulders easing just a bit. In unison, she consented. That evening, after a long stretch since their vows, James extended his hand toward Hannah's, bridging the distance between them at the table. Their fingers interlaced as they started to craft plans for the journey that could lead Ethan back home. A journey that could either fortify their unforeseen connection or expose it as something constructed on unstable ground. As James lay awake that night, his thoughts danced with endless possibilities. His son, living, an opportunity to embrace fatherhood once more. And Hannah, the woman he had wed for reasons of sympathy and practicality, had made it all possible. No matter what unfolded, their relationship would never return to its former state. The thought that haunted his sleepless nights was whether that transformation would mend the scars of history or forge new ones that neither could withstand. "How much longer do we have to go?" James inquired, gazing through the rain-drenched window of the buggy. The April rains transformed Ohio's landscape into a mosaic of muddy fields and overflowing creeks, rendering travel sluggish and challenging. As indicated by the latest signpost, it was approximately 5 miles to the Carter farm, Hannah noted, referring to the meticulously crafted map supplied by St. Mary's Home. After 3 days of travel, they found themselves utterly drained. First the train ride from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, followed by this rented buggy for the last leg into the farming region. James nodded, his knuckles pale as he clutched his knee tightly. Since departing from Millfield, he had remained mostly silent, his thoughts evidently racing forward to the instant he would reunite with Ethan. 5 years felt like an eternity to a child. Would his son truly hold any memories of him? Hannah observed James's silhouette against the muted backdrop, taking in the tightness in his jaw and the anxious manner in which he adjusted his collar for what felt like the 10th time that hour. In the weeks following her revelation about searching for Ethan, their relationship had transformed into something ambiguous. No longer the straightforward arrangement it had begun as, but delicate in its newfound complexity. "What if he prefers not to join us?" James interjected abruptly, articulating the dread that had evidently been plaguing him. Hannah selected her words with precision. "The Carters have had him for just a few months, and according to the orphanage's notes, he hasn't ceased to mention you." James faced her, his eyes revealing a raw sense of vulnerability. "And what about you? Are you ready to embrace the role of a mother to a 10-year-old boy you've yet to meet?" The inquiry took Hannah by surprise. Throughout her quest and meticulous preparations, her attention had been solely on bringing father and son back together. The notion that she would have a part in Ethan's life had lingered in the realm of the abstract until this moment. "I'm ready to give it a shot," she replied sincerely. "We'll navigate the rest as a team." The vehicle climbed the rise, unveiling a quaint farmhouse tucked away in the valley beneath. Smoke curled from the chimney, chickens scratched in the muddy yard, and a slender boy, around 10 years old, could be seen chopping kindling by the barn. James froze, his breath hitching in his throat. "Ethan," he murmured, even though the child was too distant to be seen distinctly. Hannah brushed her fingers against his arm softly. "Keep in mind our agreement. We begin by conversing with the Carters, outlining the circumstances at hand. Take your time." James nodded with a certain detachment, his gaze fixed on the figure in the distance. As they neared the farm, a robust woman emerged onto the porch, shielding her eyes from the gentle spring sunlight. A figure stepped out from the barn, positioning himself close to the boy, who had paused his tasks to observe the oncoming buggy. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter?" Hannah shouted as their buggy came to a halt in the yard. "That's us," the farmer responded with a hint of hesitation. Not a lot of people come around these parts. Hannah was the first to descend, lending a hand to James as he followed her down. His legs appeared shaky as he fixed his gaze on the boy, who had edged nearer to Mr. Carter. "My name is Hannah Blackwood, and this is my husband, James. We have been in communication with St. Mary's Home regarding a boy who has been entrusted to your care." Mrs. Carter's expression shifted at once, revealing a blend of comprehension and caution that danced across her weathered features. "You should come inside," she said, motioning toward the house. James paused, his eyes lingering on the boy, who was observing them with clear intrigue. The child's hair appeared more radiant than James recalled, yet the contours of his face and the stance of his shoulders were undeniably recognizable. "Could that be him?" James inquired with a raspy voice. "Could that be Ethan?" The boy's eyes grew large at the mention of the name. Mr. Carter gently rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We refer to him as Will here. Arrived without a family name." Mrs. Carter welcomed them in, where a kettle was already bubbling on the stove. The farmhouse kitchen exuded simplicity and cleanliness, featuring a well-worn Bible prominently placed on the table. "We'll gather more wood for the fire," Mrs. Carter directed, clearly eager for a moment of private conversation with the guests. Ethan nodded and stepped outside, throwing one last inquisitive look at James as he departed. As soon as the door clicked shut, Mrs. Carter faced them head-on. "Are you asserting that you are the boy's father?" James nodded, struggling to find his voice. "After the passing of his mother, my son found himself in the Westmoreland County orphanage. A fire broke out. They said he had gone missing. Mr. Carter confirmed that he survived. He was discovered meandering alongside other children in the aftermath of the fire. Welcomed him into our lives, intending to nurture him as if he were our own." The farmer's face contorted with anguish. "After that, I found myself without a job at the mill, was unable to deliver appropriately." "So, you positioned him at St. Mary's?" Hannah offered softly. Mrs. Carter nodded, her hands fidgeting against her apron as a wave of anxiety washed over her. "The most challenging endeavor we ever undertook. When the Harrisons were unable to hold on to him, we found ourselves with a second opportunity." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "He is a fine young lad, intelligent, assists willingly and without hesitation. Can you provide evidence that he belongs to you?" Mr. Carter posed a direct question to James. James delved into his coat, pulling out a small daguerreotype. Ethan, just 5 years old, perched on James's knee. The boy's face, while youthful, bore an undeniable resemblance. James mentioned softly that he has a birthmark. A crescent shape rests just beneath his right ear. Family significance. My father experienced it. I possess it. My son possesses it. The Carters shared a look, an unspoken agreement flowing between them. She spoke gently, revealing, "He talks about you. His father, the miner, always believed you would seek him out eventually." James shut his eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. He whispered, "I never stopped searching. Not a chance in my heart." As Ethan stepped back inside, the door swung open, revealing him with an armful of wood. He halted abruptly, acutely aware of the palpable tension surrounding him. "Will," Mrs. Carter spoke softly, "this man has traveled quite a distance to be in your presence, he believes. He thinks he could possibly be your father." The boy's grip on the firewood grew stronger. His expression was cautious, yet a glimmer of hope danced in his eyes that mirrored James's perfectly. Ethan spoke carefully. "My father worked in the mines. He was returning for me after my mother passed away." James advanced cautiously, pausing as he worried about scaring the little one. "Your mother's name was Olivia," he said, his voice heavy with feeling. "She crafted lavender sachets for your garments. A wooden horse I crafted for your 3rd birthday was a special gift. Thunderstorms filled you with fear." As every detail unfolded, the astonishment in Ethan's eyes deepened. The firewood fell, neglected, to the ground. "Father," he murmured. Something shattered within James at that moment. With swift determination, he traversed the space in just 2 strides, lowering himself to kneel before his son. "Ethan," he exhaled softly, refraining from making contact with the boy, allowing him the choice. Ethan lifted a shaking hand to James's ear, gently moving aside his hair to uncover the crescent birthmark that mirrored his own. "You arrived," he remarked, a blend of astonishment and reproach coloring his tone. "You actually showed up." "I never stopped looking," James repeated, tears streaming freely down his face. "Always held on to hope." Ethan leaped into his father's embrace, the 5 years apart dissolving in a heartbeat. James embraced him tightly, his strong hands supporting his son's head as though he could vanish once more. Hannah lingered at a distance, observing the heartfelt reunion, her own eyes glistening with tears. Mrs. Carter stepped closer, joining her as they both observed the extraordinary event taking shape before them. "So, you're the one taking on the role of his new mother?" Mrs. Carter inquired gently. Hannah paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. "I am the wife of James," she replied with caution. "I assisted in locating Ethan along with the others. Ultimately, the decision rests with Ethan." After a long stretch of time filled with explanations and tears, and following Ethan's display of his modest collection of treasures, rocks, feathers, and a tin soldier missing one arm, the question of what unfolded next emerged. "We want you to come home with us," James said to his son, who was sitting next to him at the Carter's table. "Returning to Millfield, if that's your desire." Ethan glanced hesitantly between the Carters, who had shown him kindness, and the father he had always hoped would return. "What's the situation with school?" he inquired. "Mrs. Carter has been guiding me through my letters." Hannah then spoke, finally directing her words to Ethan. "She stated that she is the teacher at Millfield School. Every child involved in mining is present." Ethan observed her with keen interest. "Are you truly my new mother?" The bluntness of the inquiry caused all the grown-ups to squirm in their seats. Hannah looked directly into his eyes with sincerity. "This past winter I tied the knot with your father," she explained. "We have been on a quest to find you as a team. I would be grateful to join your family, but I recognize that it will require patience." Ethan reflected on this with a child's extraordinary ability to embrace intricate circumstances. "Are you familiar with my biological mother?" Hannah dismissed the idea with a shake of her head. "No, but your father mentioned that she was compassionate and courageous, and she loved you deeply." Ethan nodded, content with this response for the moment. "Am I allowed to bring my collections?" he inquired, pivoting to face James once more. "Mrs. Carter believes that a man requires his significant possessions. Every single one," James vowed, his voice thick with feeling. That evening, Ethan settled into a cozy trundle bed in the spare room of the Carters' home, where James and Hannah had found their temporary refuge. As the boy's breathing deepened into sleep, Hannah observed James gazing at his son, committing the child's features to memory as if fearing he might disappear. "He possesses your eyes," Hannah murmured, "and that resolute chin of yours." James lifted his gaze. Hannah had never encountered such a vulnerability in his expression before. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for discovering him, for returning him to me." Hannah nodded, feeling a mix of emotions as she processed the deep appreciation in his voice. In the serene farmhouse, where the only sound was Ethan's rhythmic breathing, an unspoken change stirred between them once more, transcending their pragmatic arrangement and revealing a truth more profound than their recent careful exchanges. "What unfolds when we make our way back to Millfield?" Hannah inquired softly. "Regarding our agreement?" James pondered the question, his eyes drifting back to his slumbering son. "I'm not sure," he confessed. "Yet it cannot possibly remain unchanged, can it?" Hannah nodded in agreement. "It is not possible." The recognition lingered in the air between them. A realization that discovering Ethan had transformed everything, compelling them to face the essence of their marriage in ways neither had foreseen. "It's time for us to sleep," Hannah finally suggested. "Tomorrow will present its unique set of challenges." As she nestled onto her side of the bed, preserving the delicate space they had created, Hannah pondered the mysteries that lay ahead for them in Millfield. Their pragmatic union had fulfilled its intended role. Ethan has been discovered. The hidden quest had come to an end. The question lingered. Was the bond they had forged over these months robust enough to create something entirely new? A genuine family for a boy who had endured great loss. And maybe a true partnership for two individuals who started with little more than need and practicality. The church bells of Millfield resonated through the valley, calling the faithful to gather for Sunday service. Hannah made a final adjustment to Ethan's collar, carefully smoothing down a rebellious cowlick that wouldn't cooperate. "Must I attend?" the young lad inquired, shifting restlessly in his freshly donned attire. Returning to Millfield after 2 weeks has required numerous adaptations. A fresh abode, an unfamiliar town, and a multitude of curious faces observing his every action. "Your father is waiting," Hannah said softly. Initial perceptions hold significant weight in a close-knit community. Ethan let out a theatrical sigh, but acquiesced with a nod. In the brief period following his return, Hannah had come to recognize his sharp intellect, his insatiable curiosity, and his tenacious nature, traits that brought James to mind. Outside the cottage, James stood with quiet anticipation, clad in his finest attire. The transformation in him since Ethan's return was striking. He held himself with greater confidence, offered smiles with ease, and had completely abstained from whiskey. The mining company had permanently designated him for surface work, acknowledging his talent for identifying hazardous conditions following the recent cave-in. "Ready?" James inquired as they stepped out. His gaze locked with Hannah's over Ethan's head, a wordless understanding that had blossomed between them since their trip to Ohio. The stroll to the church drew the gaze of every porch and garden they went by. The tale of Ethan's astonishing comeback raced through Millfield with the speed of a wildfire. Some referred to it as a marvel. Whispers circulated about Hannah's timely arrival just months prior to the boy's discovery. Little communities flourished amidst such enigmas. The church steps welcomed Reverend Logan as he greeted them. His face radiated with authentic happiness. "The wayward one has come back," he remarked, gripping James's shoulder. "The divine operates through enigmatic paths." "Indeed he does," James responded, his hand resting reassuringly on Ethan's shoulder. Within the space, the assembly showed minimal restraint in concealing their intrigue. Mrs. Winters let out a disapproving sniff as Ethan inadvertently kicked the pew ahead of them, while her unmarried daughter, Catherine, scrutinized Hannah with narrowed eyes. "Everyone's watching," Ethan murmured, his voice carrying just enough for those around to catch his words. "They're simply pleased for us," Hannah reassured him, even though the watchful eyes made her own shoulders tighten. Following the service, the anticipated assembly took place on the church lawn. Neighbors gathered to greet Ethan upon his return, to offer their congratulations to James, and to evaluate if the unusual situation surrounding the Blackwood family merited additional chatter. Old Harris remarked gruffly, "He carries your look, Blackwood. Exudes that same unwavering resolve." "Exactly like him," Mrs. Logan concurred, gently patting Ethan's head as though he were a much younger child. Ethan handled the attention with unexpected poise, responding to inquiries courteously, yet inching closer to James as each new person came into view. Hannah observed from a distance as the father and son maneuvered through the intricate web of social interactions. Even though she had been by Ethan's side every day at school, assisted him in getting comfortable in the cottage, and cared for his needs alongside James, she felt a lingering doubt about her role in this reunion narrative. "Truly impressive, Mrs. Blackwood, wouldn't you agree?" Hannah glanced over to see Mrs. Winters standing next to her, a shrewd smile playing on her thin lips. Discovering the boy so swiftly after tying the knot with his father, the older woman remarked, as if you had a sense of where to search from the very beginning. The tension lingered in the atmosphere, echoing the murmurs Hannah had caught wind of throughout the town since their arrival with Ethan. "Our search was guided by a higher power," Hannah responded calmly, echoing the Reverend's words. "We appreciate his guidance." Mrs. Winters pressed her lips together. "Truly, fate has shown great favor upon you, Mrs. Blackwood. A role in education, a partner by my side, and now a family that feels complete. What an extraordinary transformation for a woman who came with nothing but a borrowed dress." Before Hannah had a chance to reply, Ethan emerged beside her, effortlessly intertwining his small hand with hers. "Pa says we can go home now," he declared. "He assured me he would demonstrate the art of carving a whistle." Mrs. Winters' expression eased a bit at the boy's naive interruption. "It must bring you great joy to be back home, Ethan." The boy glanced at Hannah, then shifted his gaze to the inquisitive neighbor. "I am," he stated plainly. "I have my father back, and Hannah tells the most captivating stories of anyone at the orphanage." The straightforward statement, delivered with the pure sincerity of a child, rendered Mrs. Winters momentarily at a loss for words. Hannah gently squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling a surprising warmth from his support. As they strolled home, with Ethan sandwiched between them, Hannah couldn't help but observe James's features intently. The transformations within him extended far beyond mere physical enhancements. A tranquility graced his expression that had been absent previously, even in the serene moments they had experienced together during his healing journey. "What should we prepare for our Sunday dinner?" Hannah inquired as they neared the cottage. "Chicken and dumplings," Ethan proposed right away, reminiscent of how Mrs. Carter used to prepare them. A shadow flickered across James's face at the mention of the farm family who had once looked after his son. The Carters had let go of Ethan with unexpected elegance, acknowledging that the boy truly belonged with his father. Nevertheless, Ethan frequently mentioned them, and Hannah had urged him to compose letters, convinced that maintaining the connection was vital for his adaptation. Hannah confessed, "I might not be familiar with Mrs. Carter's recipe, but I'm willing to give my own interpretation a shot." Inside the cottage, Ethan hurried to inspect the small garden box that Hannah had assisted him in planting, where radishes and carrots were emerging with their first green shoots breaking through the soil. James observed him with unmasked delight, as if still in disbelief that his son had genuinely returned home. Hannah noted his ease as she began to prepare their meal. James nodded, a contemplative look crossing his face. "I appreciate your help." "He's an extraordinary child," Hannah responded, sidestepping the appreciation in James's tone. Since their return, he had expressed his gratitude to her numerous times for locating Ethan, for creating a warm home environment, and for assisting his son in adapting to school. Every word of thanks deepened the burden of doubt she bore regarding what lay ahead for them. As the afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, Ethan dozed off on the small rug before the hearth, worn out from the thrill of church and the unending attention of the townsfolk. James draped a light blanket over him, then took a seat at the kitchen table beside Hannah, who was busy preparing lessons for the upcoming week. "We need to talk," he murmured softly, aware of their child peacefully sleeping close by. Hannah placed her pen on the table, her heart racing. "Indeed, it seems we do." "Our arrangement," James started, selecting his words with precision. "It has fulfilled its role, wouldn't you agree? Your teaching position is now firmly in place. I've got Ethan back. The reasons for our marriage have faded away." Even though she had anticipated this discussion at some point, the impact of the words was still sharp. Hannah maintained a calm demeanor, her years of experience concealing her feelings proving advantageous. "Indeed," she concurred, "the practical arrangement has successfully achieved its goals." James examined her face, as if probing for a truth hidden beneath her calm facade. "Indeed, there has been a shift in our relationship, hasn't there?" Hannah locked eyes with him unwaveringly. "What do you mean by that?" James responded in a gentle tone. "In recent months, we've supported one another through my healing journey, searched for Ethan side by side, and created a home together." He waved his hand around the cottage that had changed from a refuge steeped in sorrow to a place they now shared together. "It has evolved into something deeper than just a practical arrangement." Hannah's meticulously upheld poise faltered. "Has it really?" "You tell me," James said softly. "When you read to Ethan in the evenings, when you mend my shirts without a word, when you save the last piece of pie for me, because you know it's my favorite. Do those actions reflect a woman honoring her commitments?" Hannah found herself momentarily at a loss for words due to the bluntness of his question. For months, she had concealed herself within the comfort of their arrangement, hesitant to confront the deepening emotion she harbored for both James and Ethan. "And you," she replied at last, "bringing wildflowers for my desk at school, walking me home each day, crafting that bookshelf for my teaching materials. Do those actions reflect someone who entered into marriage out of compassion?" A hint of a smile played at the edges of James's lips. "You're aware that they aren't." The gentle sound of Ethan shifting in his slumber drifted from the hearth, his murmurs a soft, indecipherable whisper, before he fell back into stillness. Both adults turned their gaze to him, this child who had mysteriously united them and now tied them together in ways neither had foreseen. "What do you propose?" Hannah inquired, redirecting her focus to James. "A fresh proposal," he suggested, "not one arising from need or ease or sympathy, but one founded on what has developed between us over these last months." Hannah felt her heart quicken at his words, a tumult of hope and fear swirling uneasily within her. "So, James, what is it that has blossomed between us?" Rather than responding outright, James extended his hand across the table, enveloping hers in his rough palm. "When I believed I had lost Ethan, I ceased to truly live. I merely existed, drifting through each day, anticipating an end I lacked the courage to pursue openly." His thumb glided in gentle circles on her palm. "You revived my spirit, Hannah, initially through your silent resilience, and later with the promise of hope when you discovered my son. Now with this dwelling you've created for us." Tears hovered at the periphery of Hannah's sight. "Arriving in Millfield, I was fueled solely by my resolve to locate the missing children and to rectify a mistake I felt powerless to stop." She tightened her grip on his hand, holding it with more determination. "Finding a place where I truly belonged was something I never anticipated." "You belong here," James stated plainly. "With us, with me." He paused for a moment, then gently said, "If you wish to." The question lingered in the air, not merely a suggestion this time, but a deeper contemplation, an opportunity to evolve their marriage of convenience into something authentic, something selected rather than dictated by circumstance. Hannah remarked that Ethan requires stability, though her response was somewhat indirect. "He has endured significant losses already." James clarified gently, "I'm not asking for Ethan's sake. While he holds deep affection for you, I am requesting what is rightfully mine in exchange for yours." Just as Hannah was about to reply, Ethan's voice erupted from the hearth, catching them both off guard. "Are you and Hannah tying the knot again, Pa?" The boy stirred quietly, rubbing the remnants of sleep from his eyes as he sat up, unnoticed, the blanket wrapped snugly around him. James kept a firm grip on Hannah's hand as he shifted his attention to his son. "Actually, Ethan, Hannah and I have already tied the knot. We're currently contemplating the type of marriage we wish to create." Ethan pondered this with the straightforward insight of a child. "The type where you share a room, much like the Carters do? They mentioned that this is typical behavior for those who are married." Hannah's cheeks flushed with warmth at the unassuming remark, as James shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. He pulled it off somehow. "Would that trouble you?" Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "Hannah already feels like part of the family," he stated plainly. "She chases the nightmares off just like Mom used to do." The straightforward statement welled up new tears in Hannah's eyes. Though she had been diligently keeping her distance, unsure of her place, Ethan had already embraced her as a member of his newly formed family. James glanced at Hannah, curiosity evident in his gaze. "What's your take on this, Hannah? Shall we bring this union to life? Not for ease, not for Ethan, but for our sake." Hannah gazed at her father and son, the two individuals who had unexpectedly taken center stage in her life. The arrangement she had initially embraced for safety had transformed into something beyond her wildest dreams. A family, a home, a sanctuary of connection. Indeed, she responded with simplicity. An authentic union, a genuine household. James's smile lit up his face, banishing the lingering shadows of sorrow that had followed him since she first appeared at his doorstep. He leaned across the table, softly brushing his lips against hers. Their inaugural kiss, observed by a beaming 10-year-old boy who erupted with joy. As autumn draped the hills surrounding Millfield in hues of gold and crimson, Hannah lingered in the schoolyard, observing Ethan as he engaged with the other children. His assimilation into the community unfolded more seamlessly than she had anticipated. His innate charisma and sharp intellect captivated both his peers and their families. James made his way from the mine, arriving earlier than he typically did. Ever since they chose to solidify their union, he had taken to escorting her home from school every day, the three of them making their way back to the cottage together. "You're early," Hannah noted as he approached her. "On this special occasion," James responded, a cryptic smile dancing on his lips. "Ethan, it's time to head back home." The boy dashed in, his face aglow from the joy of play. "So soon?" However, Jimmy was set to reveal his new collection of marbles to me. "Marbles will wait for tomorrow," James confidently assured him. "There's something significant awaiting us at home." Hannah arched an eyebrow in curiosity, yet James simply extended his arm, guiding them through the town with an eagerness that was hard to contain. At the threshold of the cottage, James brought them to a halt. "Shut your eyes, you two." Ethan acquiesced without hesitation, ever eager for the unexpected. Hannah paused for a moment, then complied, sensing James leading them gently into the space. "Now pay attention," he directed. Hannah awoke to discover the cottage had undergone a remarkable transformation. A newly constructed bookcase dominated one wall, its shelves adorned with familiar volumes from Mr. Logan's library, books that the Reverend had referred to for sale to support church repairs. A small piano occupied the center of the room, its surface worn yet tenderly polished. "James," she whispered, approaching the instrument in a state of astonishment. "How did you manage that?" James explained that Reverend Logan mentioned you performed at your father's church. Mrs. Mason had been selling this one ever since her daughter got married and relocated. Ethan assisted me in bringing it home yesterday while you were attending your teacher's meeting. Ethan leaped with enthusiasm. "Hannah, go ahead and play something. Pa mentioned that you're familiar with all the church songs and perhaps even a few dance tunes." Hannah perched delicately on the bench, her fingers gliding over the time-worn keys, each touch evoking a sense of nostalgia. During her father's illness and the long, solitary years of searching, music served as her solace. Since arriving in Millfield, she had not laid her fingers on a piano. The initial sounds were cautious, a straightforward melody that her father had cherished. As the well-known tune enveloped the cottage, Hannah sensed the final fragments of her defenses dissolving. This was not a woman proposing a fleeting agreement. This was not a man who accepted out of pity or loneliness. This felt like home. This was home. This was love, not found in a fleeting moment of desire, but crafted meticulously over time through gentle gestures, common goals, and deliberate promises. James positioned himself behind her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder while she played. Ethan rested against the piano, captivated by the way her fingers danced over the keys. "Our family has music again," James murmured gently. His words were intended solely for her, just as they ought to be. Hannah gazed into his eyes, recognizing not gratitude or pity, but something she had long ceased to hope for. A sense of belonging, genuine acceptance, and love that is offered unconditionally rather than with reservations. Outside, the church bells of Millfield chimed the evening hour, their tones blending seamlessly with the notes of the piano. Hannah kept playing while James set about making their supper, and Ethan busied himself sorting his cherished collection of stones and feathers at her feet as the autumn light gradually dimmed into dusk. The union that started as a mere arrangement born out of compassion and practicality evolved into something neither had envisioned on that fateful December day when a forlorn stranger knocked on the door of a coal miner. Amidst shared challenges and unforeseen happiness, through unveiled truths and the grace of forgiveness, they discovered what each had quietly yearned for, not merely existing, but embracing a life filled with purpose and connection.